If you've ever held back right before something important, a raise, a relationship, a chance to be seen, there is a reason. That hesitation is childhood shame making decisions for you. And until you recognize it, it will quietly choose your career, your income, and your relationships. Childhood shame does not usually begin with one dramatic moment. It begins quietly. In small corrections. In subtle looks. In the tone of a parent's voice when you were too loud, too sensitive, too emotional, too proud, or too needy. Shame is not the same as guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, there is something wrong with me. When shame becomes internalized in childhood, it does not disappear with age. It becomes a lens. And through that lens, you begin to make adult decisions without even realizing what is guiding them. From a depth psychological perspective, especially in the tradition of Carl Jung, what remains unconscious continues to shape our behavior. Shame, when unexamined, becomes part of the shadow. It does not scream for attention. It whispers. It whispers when you hesitate to speak up in a meeting. It whispers when you lower your price before anyone questions it. It whispers when you say, it's fine, instead of saying what you really want. Childhood shame often begins in moments where your natural expression was not welcomed. Perhaps you were excited and told to calm down. Perhaps you were sad and told to stop being dramatic. Perhaps you were proud and told not to show off. Over time, your system learned that visibility is dangerous. So you learned to shrink. In adulthood, this shrinking can look like modesty, humility, or flexibility. But internally, it feels like constant self-monitoring. You scan yourself before speaking. You edit your personality to avoid rejection. In career decisions, shame often shows up as playing smaller than you are. You may avoid applying for roles you are qualified for. You may stay in environments where you are undervalued because leaving feels too exposing. Success feels risky because it increases visibility. Visibility activates old fear. If, as a child, attention came with criticism or humiliation, being seen now may unconsciously feel unsafe. Even positive attention can feel threatening. You might downplay achievements or redirect praise to others. This is not lack of ambition. It is protective adaptation. Financially, childhood shame can create deep discomfort around money. You may feel embarrassed about wanting more. Asking for a raise may feel like asking for too much. Charging fairly for your work may trigger anxiety that you are greedy or undeserving. Often, these feelings trace back to early messages about worth and entitlement. If you absorbed the belief that your needs were excessive or inconvenient, earning more may feel morally wrong. On the other side, some people overcompensate for shame by striving relentlessly. They build success as a shield. Achievement becomes a way to outrun the internal voice that says they are not enough. But even at the top, the voice remains. In relationships, shame shapes the kind of partners you choose and the roles you play. You may accept less than you want because asking for more feels selfish. You may tolerate disrespect because part of you believes you should be grateful for what you receive. You may struggle to set boundaries because boundaries require self-trust. And shame erodes self-trust. A common real-life scenario is avoiding conflict at all costs. You sense something is wrong, but you convince yourself you are overreacting. You silence your intuition to avoid appearing difficult. Shame convinces you that your discomfort is a personal flaw rather than a signal. Another subtle pattern appears in decision-making paralysis. You overthink. You research excessively. You ask for multiple opinions before acting. Beneath this is often fear of being exposed as incompetent. Childhood shame teaches you that mistakes equal rejection. So you try to eliminate risk entirely. But risk cannot be eliminated. Only growth can be postponed. Shame also shapes how you experience failure. A professional setback does not feel like a single event. It feels like confirmation. Confirmation of something you have feared about yourself for years. Instead of saying, "This didn't work," the internal narrative becomes, "I am not capable." This is the power of internalized shame. It merges identity with outcome. In social situations, shame may cause you to observe more than participate. You analyze how you are being perceived. You worry about saying something wrong. Later, you replay conversations in your mind, searching for evidence that you embarrassed yourself, even when no one else noticed. Over time, this creates exhaustion. Living under shame means constantly managing your image. You become skilled at presenting a version of yourself that feels acceptable. But beneath that presentation, there is tension. The tragedy of childhood shame is that it often forms around completely normal traits. Sensitivity, creativity, confidence, curiosity, emotional intensity. Instead of being guided and contained, these traits were criticized or ignored. So you learn to disconnect from them. Jung wrote about individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who you were conditioned to be. Shame interrupts individuation. It pressures you to conform to avoid rejection. Healing shame does not begin with positive affirmations. It begins with awareness. With noticing the moments where you shrink automatically. For example, when you minimize a success, pause. When you apologize for taking up time, pause. When you hesitate to negotiate your salary, pause. Ask yourself whose voice you are hearing. Often, it is not your adult self. It is an internalized authority from childhood. A teacher. A parent. A moment of ridicule. A look of disappointment. Once you recognize that voice, you can begin separating from it. Another important step is tolerating visibility in small doses. Share your opinion even if your voice shakes. State your price without immediately justifying it. Allow someone to compliment you without deflecting. Each of these actions challenges the shame narrative. At first, your body may react with anxiety. This is normal. You are stepping outside a long-standing adaptation. Over time, something shifts. The more you act against shame, the quieter it becomes. Childhood shame may have shaped your adult decisions, but it does not have to control them. When you begin to make choices from self-respect rather than self-protection, your life reorganizes. Career paths expand. Financial boundaries strengthen. Relationships become more balanced. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to feel solid inside yourself. Not because you became perfect, but because you stopped hiding. The parts of you that were once labeled too much or not enough were never the problem. The shame was. And once it is brought into awareness, it loses its quiet control. One of the clearest places childhood shame shows up is in moments where you are asked, implicitly or explicitly, to step forward. A promotion opportunity appears. A leadership role opens. Someone suggests your name for a visible project. On the surface, this looks like a chance. Inside, your body tightens. You begin listing reasons why you might not be ready. You focus on what you still need to learn. You convince yourself it would be irresponsible to say yes. This feels like realism, but often it is shame protecting you from exposure. As a child, being noticed may have come with criticism, comparison, or embarrassment. Being visible meant being judged. So your system learned that staying in the background is safer. In adult work life, this becomes a pattern of near misses. You are close to growth, but something always stops you. You watch others move ahead and tell yourself they are more confident, more talented, more deserving. What you rarely see is that many of them are simply less controlled by shame. In entrepreneurial or freelance settings, shame often shapes how you price your work. You may feel anxious stating your rates. You may lower your price before anyone reacts. You may add extra services for free to justify the cost. Deep down, there is often a belief that your work alone is not enough. That you must compensate for some internal deficiency. This belief rarely comes from reality. It comes from childhood moments where your efforts were overlooked or criticized. You learned that approval was conditional, so you try to preempt rejection. Money conversations activate shame because they involve valuation. And shame tells you that being valued is dangerous. Some people respond by avoiding financial responsibility altogether. They delay looking at bank statements. They procrastinate on invoices. They feel vague anxiety around money without understanding why. Others become perfectionistic. They believe that if they make no mistakes, shame cannot touch them. But perfectionism is exhausting, and it never fully works. In relationships, shame often dictates what you allow yourself to want. You may desire deeper commitment, more affection, or clearer communication, but you don't ask. You tell yourself you are asking for too much. You may accept emotional crumbs because they feel familiar. A common scenario is staying silent when something hurts you. You feel uncomfortable. A boundary has been crossed. But instead of speaking, you rationalize. You tell yourself you are being sensitive. You prioritize harmony over honesty. Later, the resentment surfaces. But by then, you blame yourself for not speaking sooner. Shame convinces you that your needs are a problem. Another pattern is choosing partners who reinforce your shame. People who are emotionally distant, critical, or inconsistent feel strangely familiar. They mirror the emotional environment you learned to navigate as a child. Healthy attention may feel suspicious. You may unconsciously test it, pull away from it, or devalue it. Shame also affects how you handle endings. In breakups, job losses, or failed projects, shame turns pain into identity. Instead of grieving the loss, you internalize it as proof of unworthiness. You replay what you did wrong. You imagine how others see you. You shrink internally, even when no one else is watching. From a depth psychological perspective, as articulated by Carl Jung, shame belongs to the shadow. It is formed when parts of you were rejected or not welcomed. These parts did not disappear. They went underground. They influence your decisions until they are brought into awareness. One of the most painful effects of childhood shame is how it interferes with joy. Even positive experiences can feel uneasy. You may anticipate that something will go wrong. You wait for the other shoe to drop. This is not pessimism. It is vigilance learned in an environment where emotional safety was unstable. Shame-trained nervous systems are always scanning for threat. Even success can feel threatening because it increases visibility. Healing begins not by eliminating shame, but by noticing it in real time. When you hesitate, pause. When you self-censor, pause. When you feel the urge to apologize for existing, pause. Ask yourself what you are protecting yourself from. Often, the fear is not present-day danger. It is remembered danger. As you begin to separate the past from the present, new choices become possible. You may still feel fear, but you no longer obey it automatically. You start allowing yourself to be seen imperfectly. You make mistakes and survive them. You speak even when your voice shakes. Over time, shame loses its authority. Your decisions become less about avoiding exposure and more about honoring your values. You choose work that aligns with you. You ask for fair compensation. You set boundaries without over-explaining. You stop negotiating your worth with the world. This does not mean shame never returns. It means it no longer controls the direction of your life. And when that shift happens, everything changes quietly but profoundly.
If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more gentle reminders of your inner power.